So I'm going to run through where we are in August. So what's new in August? So the updates that we have, some of these you've seen in the previous webinar, and there are additional items as well. So rebranding, as you mentioned, that's an ongoing process. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. The Autodesk updates, so 2025 support for AutoCAD, AutoCAD Architecture, Revit. We've also are bringing some additional features to our Revit add-in, so native PDF export in Revit 2024 and 25, and also how the published dialog works. Same as I mentioned, there's a phase one of the transmittals, so the performance enhancements that we're looking at there. And there's an additional one that you haven't seen before, is how you can control the AutoCAD Xref behavior. So the rebranding, the main things you'll see in the release that's coming up within the CAD add-ins. So for AutoCAD and Revit, you'll see XrefDocs moving away, and you'll see PentagonDocs PDA a lot more. This is an ongoing process. This is going to take a while. Some of the background applications like the admin utility, that's lower down on the list. We'll get to that eventually. And also things like folders that are created in the background, they're all gradually being updated to remove Excitek from that as well. For AutoCAD, we've now added 2025 support. For the Autodesk 2025 applications, we did have to rewrite the add-ins. Autodesk changed the technology that was used for the add-ins, so there's a bit of rewriting here. We support the same versions that Autodesk support, so the previous three, so 2022, 2023, and 2024, and that's all updated, and we're running AutoCAD and AutoCAD Architecture. On the Revit side, again, we've added 2025 support, and that had to be rewritten. There are also changes in how we deal with it. So the changes that have come along mean that 2025 has its own add-in. And some of the updates we've added in as well. So the PDF export support, that is in 2024. So that's now got its own add-in. And then 2022 and 2023, they use a previous Autodesk methodology for add-ins. So they've got their own. So it's quite a big change in all this and getting up and running for the new versions. The new support that we've added. So at the moment, you will use the XrefDocs PDF printer to generate PDF content out of Revit. There's always been an additional option where we could use Bullzip, which that's not a free PDF printer. Some people purchased that in the past and would use that. But from Revit 2024, they added native PDF export support. So we've now enabled that as an option as well. So it completely cuts out having to use like a third party, if you like, printer to create a PDF. That will now be generated all within Revit. We've also given you the option now to select what type of publishing dialog that you want. So we've called it lightweight, no pre-processing. At the moment, when you open a publish dialog and you've got 1,000 sheets in your model, which isn't an uncommon situation, it can take a long time to open because it checks every one of those sheets against the mfiles vault, makes sure all the properties, highlights where they've not been synced, etc. You can now turn that off. So when you first open the publish dialog, it doesn't do any check-in, so it opens much faster, so seconds rather than minutes. You can then select the sheets that you actually want to publish, do a refresh on those, so only those are updated from the vault, so it's a much quicker process, and then you just publish those sheets. So it improves the user experience, a lot within the Revit environment. Moving on to transmittals. As we mentioned, this is a phase one change. They've been completely rebuilt, so the interface is updated. All the back end and how it works and saves the information about what was in a transmittal, who it went to, what documents have been sent, that's all been changed. One of the key changes is it's all now processed on the server. So this brings us to speed enhancements. So previously, it would all be done on the client. So all the documents that you want to send out would have to be downloaded to the client. They all get zipped up, packaged, created there and uploaded to the client. We would also be gathering the project information when you select a project or the contact information when you're picking recipients. That would be just asked from the vault in mfiles. And again, when you've got lots and lots of objects in mfiles, so it wasn't uncommon for people to have 1,000+ contacts, say, for example, that could take a while to reload. So again, the user experience wasn't brilliant. That's all now cached on the server. So as you make changes in the mfiles vault to create new projects, companies, and contacts, this cached area gets updated. And also if you update them or delete them, they get removed or updated. And it all loads from there. So it's a much faster experience now. And again, opens in seconds rather than minutes. There is a lot of extensive changes to Transmittals. There's a migration process it has to go through to migrate your current way of working with Transmittals into the new Transmittals application. So this will require a test phase. And likewise, if some of the other updates, they do require some enhancements. So please reach out to your account manager to look into getting that deployed. The new item which we've added is the way to control the AutoCAD Xref behavior. So this is mainly really for if you're using full AutoCAD. So you have the PDA ribbon within AutoCAD. That lets you manage the Xrefs that are added to your drawing. So at the moment, it will basically, when you add an Xref, it will add it to that specific version of the Xref. And this lets you maintain an active, correct history of your DWG drawings. So when you open it in the future, it will always point to that particular Xref version. So if it's changed since then, but that wasn't relevant to the drawing that you're working with, it will remain as it was. So it keeps that in place. But feedback has come through that some people don't really care about that. That's fine. They'd rather it just always use the latest. So we've now had that ability. So there'd be a new rule on the project which sets like a default. So whether it uses the latest Xref or a specific version, that then gets copied to documents as you create them for the project. So that's the default setting, but then you can also override it on the individual documents, because there may be a key document that you always want to use the version specific, and other ones which are currently in flow, just when you use the latest, because you don't want to be reminded all the time there's new versions and Xref to load, etc. So that's been added as well. Looking at the future things that we're looking at after this release that's upcoming. We've mentioned BIM 360 support before for BIM 360 design. But obviously with Autodesk, they're sunsetting BIM 360 now. It's all Autodesk Construction Cloud. So we're looking at supporting, the collaboration models that you can put into ACC, and hopefully being able to give you that as a location where you can push a new model when you're creating it, but also the current functionality where you can take a snapshot of the model, create an IFC, remove the sheets, all the pushing into the PDA vault. We'll make sure that works with a model that is hosted in ACC. We're looking at enhancements to the document naming. So currently you apply a naming convention to a document class. So that can mean you have to create multiple classes for different naming conventions. We're looking at ways where instead of applying the naming convention to a class, we just create a naming convention standalone. And then when you create a document, you can pick the naming convention you want to use. So that would be a change we're looking at there. And that would essentially mean you'd have one drawing class. You can have many naming conventions assigned to it. And obviously you'd be able to set a default for that project. So, users wouldn't really have to pick one every single time. You pick the naming convention you need to use for a project, and they just create them as they continue. Revit sheet IDs, talked about this before. We utilize a Revit generated ID for connecting a Revit sheet in Revit to the Revit sheet that's been published to the PDA vault. That works great in isolation just with one model, but it means that you can't copy models because the IDs generated in that model will all be the same, and you end up with multiple models pointing to one sheet within the PDA vault. So we're looking to replace that to use our own ID. That would allow you to copy models. Eventually, it can allow us to create models that are a full template, so they would already have sheets set up. So we'd be able to have a mechanism where you can create a new model from that and then generate all those sheets into PDA. It opens up quite a lot of possibilities within Revit. And then there's phase 2 of Transmittals. So phase 1 is all about improving the performance, because we had a lot of feedback where that could be slow, and especially from remote users, etc. But part of the rework and all the back end is to allow us to do better reporting. So, we're all familiar with TIDP you have to deliver for a BIM project. We can pull that information out from the back end. Essentially, you should be able to say, right, for this project, what have I issued? And we should be able to then easily get a nice report based on that. And we're looking at ways potentially where we could tie that into Power BI, so you can have dashboards, etc. This will open up quite a lot of functionality on seeing the status of a project.